Is Great Britain finished? It's a question I never thought I'd be asking since I'm born and bred here and I love the country and I never thought I'd ask that question. But lately it seems like we've got this 1970s feel of decline and decay, lots of turmoil in the country. We've got the government voting against an amendment to hold a national inquiry against paedophile gang rape gangs who raped young children in this country in more than 50 cities. And the government wants to sort of sweep it under the carpet, it seems, allegedly. But we've got that feeling of, more strikes, unions demanding more. We've got train drivers' massive pay rises. We've got the civil servants who don't want to work in the office anymore. They want to work from home. Even there was a story of train drivers in a bit of snow the other day who refused to walk across a bit of snow, a couple of inches of snow, to get into the train in order to start the train to carry their passengers, the customers who pay their wages, to their destination. So there's lots of that happening. We've got higher inflation, interest rates, low investment. Now, this week, and I'm going to share a screen with you now, this week the Treasury had to step in to avoid a catastrophe in the bond market. Okay, so the pound here has fallen to the lowest rate in over a year. Borrowing costs for the government have soared. That's their long-term borrowing costs on long-dated gilts or bonds, as they're generally called. We call them gilts in the UK. But the pound is falling. I mean, I was just abroad recently, and the pound is like doesn't buy you anything. You barely get just over a euro for a pound or a dollar for a pound, and everything seems very, very expensive in most countries. There's no sort of cheap destinations anymore for when you hold in pounds. But Rachel Reeves and the Treasury had to step in to avoid a crisis in the bond market. You might say, what's that going to do with me? But these things matter because they cost the country a lot of money. If there's a bond crisis, we remember the crisis, the pound crisis, when Britain came out of the ERM. That's a long story, but these things affect our economy and they affect interest rates on our mortgages and all that sort of thing as well. So these things are uh, uh, very serious. So Rachel Reeves had to step in. The Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride said the government's decision to let it rip on borrowing means that their own tax rises will end up being swallowed up by higher borrowing costs at no benefit to the British people. The pound fell by nearly 1% against the dollar. And what he's saying is that the interest payments on the debt, which is now over 3 trillion, and I'm going to show you a chart on that, is taking up so much money of the country's money in interest payments. And we know that and America's in the same position. Their national debt is over 40 trillion. And another MP stood up in Parliament the other day and said the government has got to stop relying on quantitative easing, or to you and I, money printing, to keep paying debts and solve its problems and spend. In other words, he said you've got to switch that off. This quantitative easing this term was invented, I think, after the last financial crash. But really, for the last 20 years, governments all around the world have just been printing money, and that is causing inflation. That's why we in the UK are all poorer in terms of what we're paying for higher costs on food, energy bills, and a whole range of things, building costs. And I was listening to a very well-known property developer, and he said with the building costs now, it's almost not worth it in a lot of projects to say buy a house and build it and sell it on. It just doesn't seem to work out. Higher interest rates are stopping developers to do developments uh, and people. It's also stopping people doing things on their houses, extensions, which will employ builders and tradespeople, etc. So that's what's been happening this week. Where is Rachel Reeves in all this? Well, she's in China. Yeah, believe it or not, she's just gone off to China, swanned off, left it all to. She wasn't even in Parliament to make this announcement to defend herself. She let her junior minister face the questions, and she's gone off to China apparently to develop trade links. Well, hold on a second. she's the chancellor. She's looking after the money here. Why is she in China developing trade links? That's not the job of the chancellor of the UK. That's the job of maybe the business secretary or the foreign secretary to go out and forge these links. I don't know what she's doing, swanning off to China to develop trade links, unless there's some other reason behind it. I don't know. Um, so her budget, in her last budget, actually has raised borrowing by 145 billion. She changed the rules to do that. And the tax burden on businesses like farmers and others has risen by around 200 billion. So that is not going to uh, encourage investment. In fact, it's going to deter investment into the UK because we've got higher taxes, higher uh, costs for employers employing people on higher national insurance costs. So that's what's happening. And I think, to me, it seems like the market has lost confidence in her. Not in the way they did with Liz Truss, which was more immediate. This is more of a slow death. They seem to have lost confidence in Rachel Reeves. I never had any confidence in her in the first place. I mean, she's going off to develop trade links. To my knowledge, she's never had a business or traded in a business. She's worked for the Bank of England. She's been a sort of career type civil servant, then into politics, a bit like Keir Starmer. They just don't really have a clue when it comes to business. And they all talk about growth. She said, we will have growth. What the markets cannot see at the moment is any prospect of growth because they haven't put the conditions into the market to encourage businesses, which they are the growth providers. They provide this growth, and if businesses are saying, well, we're not going to invest, we're not going to employ more people, then where is the growth going to come from? They've also shut down production of not any new drilling in the North Sea, where we have natural oil and gas. They refuse to do fracking, where we get more gas. I mean, why? If you've got it on your doorstep, if you've got it in the country, why are they doing this and then buying more expensive energy from America, for instance? It just doesn't. I just don't get it. I can't understand it. It just doesn't make sense. The last government wanted to encourage more development in the North Sea. This government has shut it down because they've got these net zero crazy policies which they're rushing through at pace, and that's another reason why the economy I think is stalling. Another point here, you can look this up yourself. What's happening in the bond market? Why are UK borrowing costs rising, and what does it mean for me? Um, yeah, the bond is a bit like an IOU. The government borrow money on the markets through the bond market, and they pay a fixed rate of return on that bond. Bonds can be traded, so if the value of that bond goes up or down, they can also be traded. It's a huge market, but it will affect everything that's going on in the country. So I'm not going to go for all of that, okay? But I wanted to touch on the national debt here, and this is a website you can look up yourself, National Debt Clock, and just have a look at that. That's not 3 billion, that's 3 trillion, okay? And you can see that is actually going up as we look at it, and the national debt now is growing by the rate of £5,170 per second. Okay, this is frightening. It's like having a credit card that is literally out of control. So what is happening? I think they've got to get this debt under control, but they're not. They're increasing borrowing. It's like they're just living on the never never. And the other problem is with growth is that our growth is slowing. It's falling behind other countries. Countries like Indonesia over the next decade or so will overtake the UK economy in size, and the UK will slip down from seventh in the world to maybe ninth or tenth, and Indonesia is going to slip in there, and other developing countries will overtake the UK. So it's falling behind. The average GDP per capita in the UK, and listen to this. This is not the overall GDP, but when you look at the average GDP per capita of each person and what they're really worth, is now lower than it was 17 years ago. In other words, the average person in the UK is actually worse off. Of course, a lot of people are wealthy. You can go out to restaurants in London and they're all full up with people. Not everyone is poor, but I'm talking about over the average. And certainly if you go to towns up north, it's very different from London and the southeast. It's almost like another world in some parts of the country compared to the big cities, London and Manchester and so on. So it's a problem, and that's why I'm asking, and I want your opinion. Is the country finished? Well, not necessarily. It's not all doom and gloom. I think if things can still be turned around, but it's going to be difficult. And when I say it's not all doom and gloom, there are still people trying to get to the UK because they know they can earn money. They can earn more money than in their country. Even if they're working in the black economy, they can earn more money than they can in their country. So in a way, it's still a good place to earn if you've got the right skills and you've got the right sort of business. And it's still, a big economy. But looking forward, this is what concerns me. The other thing is that what can you do about it? Well, recessions can be a good time to invest. It can be a good time to make money. It can be a good time to take advantage of falling asset prices if you're positioned right. And I think the final thing I'd say on this is whatever the economy is doing, what really matters is what you are doing with your economy, your economy, as I call it, and how you're managing your money, how you're investing your money, what you're doing with your money. I mean, you can always move abroad, of course. That's not as easy. It's easier said than done. But it's really down to what you do rather than what's going on in the bond market and all these. I think it still pays to be aware of what's going on in these markets, but you can't sit at home worrying about Rachel Reeves or the bond market. You've got to get on with your own business. But I know things are tight. I was talking to a small business yesterday, and he said, "Well." And they're always full. They're a little sort of clinic, and they're always full. But they said we're really struggling because costs have gone up, cost of energy, cost of the council, the council tax, the local rates are very, very expensive for businesses with a premises or an office. So I think the government's got to change its direction and help businesses and help farmers and encourage investment in the UK. But in the meantime, all we can do is get on with our own situation, row our own boat, as I always say, and just get on with things. You don't have to join in the downfall of Britain. You don't have to join in the recession. Just get on with your life, and there'll always be rich and poor people in any country. And I've been to some very poor countries and seen there's still a lot of wealthy people there. So, I don't think it's, to answer my first question, I don't think it's finished just yet, but the long-term trend is not looking good right now. Now, if you want more help with managing your money, do join me on my webinars, which I run most weeks, 7 p.m. UK time, and I'll take you through 3 steps to financial freedom. And we'll look at the mindset around money, the management of money, and how to really turn your financial world around in a very, very short time. So do check that out, and I'll see you again on the next video. I'll just finally say that. Yeah, check out that webinar, 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening, 3 steps of financial freedom. And we'll look at the mindset and the management of money to help you turn your financial world around very, very quickly. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.